I think that the more integration we can have with Malaysia and the more, both countries can take advantage of their relative strengths. I think this is a grow the pie sort of thing, right? And I think the SEZ is like 5 times the size of Singapore. And there's already been some spillover, right? When we did the moratorium on the data centers, people went over to Johor to build data centers. They clearly have way more land. I think this is good. It's a win-win if we can get it off the ground. Building a greater, more integrated economic zone is an awesome development for both Singapore and Malaysia.
Welcome to Brave. Learn from Southeast Asia's best tech leaders. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. No BS on success. I'm Jeremy Au, venture capitalist, serial founder, Harvard MBA, science fiction nerd, and dad of 2 daughters. Every week, we debate startup news, interview changemakers, answer listener questions, and share personal insights. Join our movement of over 40,000 members and get transcripts, resources, and community at www.bravesea.com. Stay well and stay brave. You don't want to miss Geeks on a Beach, the unique premier startup conference in the region. Join us from November 13th to 15, 2024 at J Park Island Resort in Mactan, Cebu. This event brings together tech enthusiasts, investors, and entrepreneurs for 3 days of workshops, talks, and networking. Register at geeksonabeach.com and use code BRAVEC for a 45% discount for the first 10 registrations and 35% off for the next ones. Morning, Shiyan.
Good morning from beautiful farm stay in God knows where, Margaret River. Hello.
What are you doing at a farm stay? Sounds so quaint.
It's the September holidays for my kids, and so we wanted something close by. And I think in general, the goal for holidays is to just have them be outside as much as possible. So this kind of fit the bill. I can hear goats bleating from my bedroom window, but there's sheep and chickens and ducks and fish and a diabetic horse. So lots of animals for the kids to feed and interact with.
You said diabetic horse? Is that a real thing?
Yeah, horses also get diabetes. And we learned this because the farmer was like, contrary to what you might have read in books, you cannot feed this horse apples or sugar lumps. You can only feed it carrots.
Did they get diabetes from people giving them?
Well, I think he's just old and has diabetes. But yes, so they have to manage his blood sugar, because you know what? It is literally like humans. Basically, what happens is his hooves rot.
Oh no.
You know, like how humans, they get issues with their feet, their extremities with uncontrolled diabetes. It's the same thing.
Well, I don't know. Has the horse heard about Ozempic, GLP-1, the wonder drug for longevity folks? And have they heard of metformin, which will help you with your diabetes, but also gives you life extension? Just triggered because the upcoming Don't Die conference by longevity champion Brian Johnson is coming to Singapore in a few weeks.
Have you also been retargeted by their Instagram ads? Because I keep seeing ads for that conference.
Well, it is my fault. I have, gone to previous Don't Die events. And I do read about this stuff. And I guess I'm bang in the middle, right? It's like middle-aged, tacky.
Well, I did not ask the farmer about the horse's consideration of Ozempic, but he did mention that because they have nationalized healthcare in Australia, so they're used to pretty affordable healthcare, but obviously there's no nationalized healthcare for animals, right? So he's like, yeah, you get the vet out here and it's $500, or it's very, very expensive. There's no subsidies. So I somehow doubt that this horse is gonna, get on Ozempic anytime soon. But now that's making me curious, have they done there is an overweight pet problem in developed countries. So I wonder if anybody has done a pet focused weight or diabetes management solution.
So it's
that's the next gold mine, Jeremy.
This thesis driven investing.
Well, okay, but it's not totally ridiculous. One, people do spend a lot of money on their pets. And two, there's that company that's doing longevity experiments on dogs, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to prove out that the drug will extend lives on dogs first because they live shorter lives, so you get data faster, but also the regulatory bar is lower, right?
Yeah. No, I think this also works because I think Shark Tank, there's also a startup that did really well, which was just doing kind of DNA testing for dogs and did really well. And I watched that clip and I was like, yeah, maybe there could be one DNA testing, but for cats in Southeast Asia and dogs. That could be a really large business. And they have an Indonesia thesis and et cetera, et cetera.
No. No. It still goes back to per capita disposable income.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nations are not spending that on cats.
Well, we're here in the brainstorm mode. We're here to diverge, not converge, and etc. etc. Building mode. But yeah, talk about building mode. We wanted to talk because there's a big news about the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone that's coming up. Sounds like it is a potential signing date in November this year. So, what do you think about that, Shiyan?
I think it's awesome. I mean, like, there's always that very famous clip of LKY tearing up in the announcement of the separation and the fears of not having a hinterland. And so I think that the more integration we can have with Malaysia and the more, both countries can take advantage of their relative strengths, I think this is a grow the pie sort of thing, right? And I mean, I think the SEZ is like 5 times the size of Singapore. And there's already been some spillover, right? When we did the moratorium on the data centers, people went over to Johor to build data centers. They clearly have way more land. And I think this is good, right? It's a win-win if we can get it off the ground. I mean, I do think there are probably some challenges in terms of red tape. It's not totally clear, like the grid, power management, all that kind of stuff. If, we're going to try to move in that direction, how much of that has already been planned for? But I mean, I think at a high level, it's good. And maybe once the MRT is up and running as well, so it's not so onerous to get over the border, like there's no reason why people can't live in JB and work in Singapore, or vice versa, which I think just opens up also access to real estate at different price points. There's a reason artists don't live in Manhattan. Artists live in Brooklyn or Queens, but they want access to dense theater going populations in Manhattan or whatever it is, right? I think that's like building a greater, more integrated economic zone is an awesome development for both Singapore and Malaysia. How about you, Jeremy? What do you think?
Well, you made me laugh talking about real estate because almost every Singaporean's dream to buy a home in Johor Bahru and etc. Rent out the Singapore home. I think zooming out here, it makes sense because Singapore has the capital stack as well as technology and high skilled labor. Obviously, Johor has a lot of land, its infrastructure that's coming together. So I think like you said, the sum is larger than the composition of its parts here. And this is actually kind of creating a potential alternative to, for example, MNCs are looking to build in Vietnam as part of China Plus One, or Indonesia as part of that China One Plus One strategy. I think Johor plus Singapore would be a really attractive industrial park, I think, because a lot of executives, for example, the MNC's HQs are based in Singapore, for example. That's one. But two, of course, they need access to the infrastructure. And then Johor and Singapore both have enough energy. And both Johor and Singapore have a lot of deep water ports as well. So it's not a detour, for example, if you were in Indonesia Industrial Park. It's a bit of a detour for the shipping as well in terms of logistics costs. So I think there's a lot of things that really like tick all the blocks. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I have a small dream. Like, I don't know if this dream is possible, but I would love to be able to build a cabin by myself with my own 2 hands somewhere that I can drive to. So any listeners have ideas for where in Johor this may be possible, please let me know. I'm all ears. But yes, that is like, I don't know, the Hudson Valley, right? Or you can go have your cottage somewhere, plant vegetables. So enjoy your farmer's market. So,
Build a farm
yeah,
stay. Actually, that's not a bad idea. That could be a business, a farm stay in Johor Bahru for Singaporeans who would rather fly to Australia currently.
Oh, but I have heard the big talk down here is that there may be direct international flights from Singapore to Busselton, which is the small airport closest to Margaret River, which would be amazing because that would save the like almost 3-hour drive from Perth, which is currently how you fly in and out.
Yeah. So thinking about the SEZ, what are the key things to believe or perhaps risk factors?
Well, for whom, right? I think for investors is you need to believe that the local state government can align its processes to and facilitate some of this investment. I was reading something about how Selangor has like a 100-day guarantee on getting permits done, whereas in JB it can take up to a year. And so I think things like that, it's all the very boring but essential logistical details of getting companies up and running. And so it's like, oh, okay, I need to make an investment. Well, what do I need? I need to incorporate a business. I need to get my factory set up. So I need to get access to land. I need building permits. Oh, I need workers. So then I need work permits, right? Like the whole stack of basically wrote down a list of all the things it would take you to get up and running. I need import permits for my machinery, whatever it is. Can the local government, which may not be used to dealing with some of these things, which could be more federal types of processes, work together to facilitate seamless onboarding. I think that's what's going to drive the attractiveness of it. Because it's one thing to have the marketing message, but it's another thing to actually like execute against that. So, I mean, I recently had an experience where one of our companies got acquired by a Abu Dhabi incorporated business. And there's a big push for Dubai, Abu Dhabi, like, hey, come do business here, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, I expect this to be like a very seamless process. But it's been months and the transaction is still not done because there's some KYC requirement that is kind of above and beyond any other KYC requirement I've ever seen. And this is like a small company. And so this poor founder is running around to all these angels and small funds to be like, I need this 9th level of KYC. And we've gone back and forth with the lawyers and we've been like, hey, what's your goal, right? Instead of just trying to check every box, what's your goal? How do we like get this done? And they're like, no, this is just required. And so I think there's like a mismatch between the marketing message and the actual like on the ground, like how do you do business? And so I think the risk is, can we iron out all those kinks and make sure that the first 50, first 100 people who come have a great experience? We start building the muscle there. And then I think there's the collaboration, which is like, how do both sides collaborate on ensuring that it's seamless, not just within JB or within Singapore, but like across the two administrative functions to create those benefits that we're hoping will happen.
Yeah, I think it's super key. I agree with you because point of a special economic zone is that it's supposed to make that paperwork in that sense be much more streamlined, because what often happens for the SEZ is like all the rules and regulations that don't make sense for import, export, trade kind of creates a regulatory tax. So I think that's really key, the fix. I would say another thing I will add to it is I think labor movements will be pretty important. Like, can Singaporeans travel to the SEZ very well? Can other folks within Malaysia travel to SEZ or move or migrate necessarily to service it? And then, of course, I think politics, obviously, I think the Singapore government is obviously cohesive because regional and local elections are effectively the same in this one. But of course, Johor is different from the national Malaysia government. And so having that kind of three-way conversation is quite key to keep that trust and regulatory alignment together for the SEC.
Exactly.
So talking about obviously a big part of it is because there's a shift in manufacturing activity from China towards Southeast Asia because of the deterioration in trade relations between the US and China. So I was reading about a new piece of legislation that I was very surprised by, which is called the reverse CFIUS. So CFIUS was a kind of like committee that basically says, hey, the US government can veto inbound investments to America from China, which killed a lot of investment activity by Chinese capital players within America. But this is the reverse version of that, which is American people cannot invest in China if they're considered to be strategic or national importance.
So I think, Jeremy, you're totally right in that the original CFIUS bill cast a real pall on Chinese investment into the US. A lot of investors who thought they were going to do direct investing sort of killed their direct investing programs and then went to become LPs instead, so that they're 1 degree removed. But even more recently, there's been one more layer of cooling where funds are not even wanting to accept Chinese LPs. So, you can sort of see the withdrawal of capital by level from direct to LP investing to even funds now saying, hey, actually, we don't want to take the money because we don't want the additional scrutiny or have that perception that we're backed by Chinese money. And so this reverse CFIUS plan is pretty onerous as well. So it's saying that any U.S. person or U.S. entity cannot invest in a Chinese-owned entity that touches AI, security, quantum computing. And if you read the definitions of AI, like, it's actually pretty broad. And there is like a rule about what the threshold on ownership is, which is that if it is more than 50% owned by Chinese people, it's considered a Chinese entity. So even if your company were, as I read it, it could be US incorporated, Seychelles incorporated, Singapore incorporated, but let's say there were 6 founders and they held Chinese passports and they had 10% ownership each, that's 60%. That's considered like a Chinese investee that a US person would be prohibited from investing in if that company was working in any of these restricted areas. So this is one of these like self-reporting burdens. So I think a lot of people just won't want to deal with it, and so they'll just avoid investing in it, which is kind of unfortunate. And I think the logic is that even getting investment benefits the Chinese economy in some way. And given the sort of dual use cases of AI and some of these security technologies, there's no other way to prevent China from benefiting.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a huge
Yeah, it's
dynamic
pretty-
because I think effectively it just means that we are not going to see any American citizen touch a Chinese citizen, I think, effectively in practice in terms of investments.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's a bit of a pity, right? It's like maybe we grew up in the golden age of globalization where it's like the world is flat. It's the end of history, Francis Fukuyama, everything. And then now this is like the really rip-roaring backlash on the way back. But did you see there was somebody who served in Cuomo and current New York governor Kathy Hochul's administration who is being charged as a Chinese agent?
I know what's up with that.
It was crazy. It's like I don't even think she was that senior, but it was something like she was the liaison to the Asian American communities or whatever. The really funny thing was that she was charged with receiving money, but also special ducks. Like, I don't know, they like
Ducks.
delivered special ducks, like quack quack, like food. It's so Chinese. Like some sort of special ducks were delivered to her house every 6 months during this period where apparently she was working for the Chinese government. But she also apparently blocked, like some Taiwanese delegation wanted to meet with the governor and she blocked it. You know, she like removed any comments around Taiwan from any official statements, things like that. But yeah, I'll send you the article. I mean, it's not amusing, obviously, to have spies, but the type of things that you receive as your benefit is very amusing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a big surprise because I think that people felt, at least I did, that I think Trump obviously set up a bunch of tariffs and then Biden kind of like doubled down on those types of tariffs into specific goods, but didn't necessarily create new types of goods covered by those tariffs. So in other words, it was kind of a bit of status quo already priced in. And then of course, I think what's interesting is that this this restriction on American capital in Chinese affiliated companies, either in the form of people or in the form of geography, regardless of whether you are a direct investment or an LP, is basically kind of like cutting off a huge amount of capital flows. That would just make it, I think, very difficult. And it makes me wonder if there'll be more types of that, right? This is currently for investors, but you could imagine, could you imagine American manufacturers? Could there be legislation that covers American manufacturers looking at setting up or partnering or JVing with Chinese companies as well?
I don't think Biden administration was neutral on China. I mean, I think they took the Trump measures and amped them up. The one thing Republicans and Democrats can agree on is that it is politically favorable to be harsh on China. I think they differ in terms of what's the right way to do it, but I think they're both in agreement on that. And I think Biden actually took Trump's ideas and extended them. I mean, if you look at all the defense spending, all the things that are going on there, I think the Americans are really worried and they're really trying to put their money where their mouth is in terms of their innovation investments and then also in all the sort of blocks that they're trying to put on the Chinese. So this is just going to get worse. And I think it's going to be challenging for us as Singapore to kind of keep walking our line between those two big elephants in the room and not to be sort of portrayed by any one side to be on the other superpower side.
And on that cheerful note, let's peace out. See you next time. Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.